Buddha, born Siddhartha Gautama in the 5th to 6th century BCE in ancient India, was deeply influenced by the religious and cultural environment of his time, which was rooted in what is now recognized as early Hinduism. However, his teachings ultimately diverged significantly from the prevailing Hindu traditions, creating a distinct path that became Buddhism. Below is a more detailed exploration of this relationship. Buddha's background in Hindu culture. Siddhartha Gautama was born into a Kshatriya, warrior family of the Shakya clan. As part of the Vedic culture, his upbringing exposed him to the rituals, spiritual practices, and philosophical ideas of early Hinduism, which was centered around the Vedas. The dominant religious landscape of the time included Vedic rituals and sacrifices, performed by Brahmins to please deities and maintain cosmic order. Belief in karma and samsara, the law of moral cause and effect, and the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Pursuit of moksha, liberation from the cycle of samsara, as described in the Upanishads, which were philosophical texts that expanded upon the Vedic tradition. As a young man, Siddhartha studied with ascetic teachers who adhered to these philosophies, particularly those emphasizing meditation, renunciation, and metaphysical exploration. Similarities between Buddha's teachings and Hinduism. Buddha incorporated some fundamental ideas from the religious and philosophical milieu of his time, including karma and samsara. Both Hinduism and Buddhism accept the principle of karma, where actions have consequences that shape future experiences, and samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. However, Buddha redefined these ideas, focusing less on metaphysical explanations and more on their practical implications for ending suffering. Meditation and inner transformation. Buddha adopted meditative practices like dhyana, deep meditation, which were already part of Hindu and ascetic traditions, but he emphasized mindfulness and direct experiential insight as the core of spiritual progress. Ethical living, dharma. Both traditions emphasize the importance of dharma, though the term has different meanings. In Hinduism, it often refers to one's duties based on caste and stage of life, whereas in Buddhism, it refers to the teachings of the Buddha as a universal path to liberation. Key departures from Hinduism. Despite these overlaps, Buddha's teachings broke away from several key tenets of Hinduism, often in response to the perceived limitations and inequities of the Vedic system. Rejection of the caste system. Hindu society at the time was rigidly organized into a caste hierarchy, with Brahmins at the top as spiritual authorities. Buddha explicitly rejected this structure, asserting that spiritual liberation is accessible to all, regardless of birth or social status. He opened his monastic order to people from all castes, including women. Critique of rituals and deities. Vedic Hinduism placed significant emphasis on rituals, sacrifices, and offerings to gods as essential for maintaining cosmic harmony and personal prosperity. Buddha dismissed these practices as ineffective for achieving liberation, advocating instead for ethical conduct, meditation, and wisdom as the true path to freedom from suffering. No eternal soul, anatta. Hinduism often teaches the concept of Atman, the eternal, unchanging soul, which is ultimately united with Brahman, the universal reality, in liberation. Buddha rejected the idea of a permanent soul, introducing the doctrine of anatta, no self. He taught that what we perceive as the self is merely a collection of impermanent physical and mental phenomena. This insight was central to his teaching on overcoming attachment and achieving nirvana. Focus on suffering, dukkha. While Hinduism emphasizes moksha as union with the divine, Buddha focused on the human condition, particularly the pervasive nature of suffering, dukkha, and its cessation through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Buddhism as a reform movement. Buddha's teachings can be viewed as a reformative response to the religious practices and philosophies of his time. Key elements of this reform include practical and experiential approach. Buddha's teachings emphasize direct personal experience over dogma or reliance on sacred texts. He encouraged followers to test his teachings through their own practice. Universal accessibility. By rejecting caste distinctions and complex rituals, Buddha made the path to liberation accessible to all, emphasizing personal effort and ethical living. Rejection of speculative metaphysics. Buddha discouraged speculation about metaphysical questions, the origin of the universe or the nature of the soul, focusing instead on practical ways to end suffering. Was Buddha a Hindu? In a cultural sense, Buddha's early life was steeped in the traditions of Hinduism. However, his teachings represent a significant departure from the dominant religious framework of his time, creating a new path that became Buddhism. While he drew upon ideas and practices familiar within Hinduism, his focus on non-attachment, rejection of the caste system, and the doctrine of no self marked a radical shift. Buddhism is better understood as an independent tradition that emerged as both a continuation and critique of the religious environment in which Buddha lived.